I'm Leroy West.
Can you give him the mic?
I live in Prestone.
Oh, yes.
Thank you.
I'm Leroy West. I live in Prestone. Resident of the Southeast Valley. And I'm really working to build a common understanding throughout the valley that we're one bioregion, we're all in it together. And I'm the president of Bucket Grant, which is one of the second largest community in the valley. The board is Succeed. And we're really working for economic development and sustainable. Would you like to introduce yourself?
This is Tricia. Tricia is one of the leading columnists for the Crestone Eagle. And by the way, there's something super interesting there, which is that these guys at the end of their presentation gave statistics that basically the valley is already self-sufficient for solar. I had no idea. They just took the numbers. So we've got to figure out how to get that.
I'm just going to add on to something. So I would only clarify that the valley can be, because production is only one piece of the puzzle, right? How the utilities manage that power is something else. So, like when we saw that wet spring snow last year that shut everything down, we had solar production at that point. I was in Moscow at 8:15. The snow was off the panels. Whatever our capacity to produce was, more than the valley needed, was happening and going nowhere because the decisions that Excel or Fiesco had made as far as what circuits tripped, where the power, what lines were energized. So that's the second piece of it, and that's the one that I would love to get more discussion around, because that's a conversation I try to have with Excel at every available possibility. And as developers come to the county and say, "Yeah, we're going to help your local reliability," I'm like, "Yes, and you're only helping it so far. If the power company is not going to do anything with the power you're producing, you're not going to get the best local." That one was wet snow, so that one was obviously something else. I think the system design is around protecting the system more than the users.
I just wanted to say Richard had mentioned that they're doing some stuff with wires and poles. And that's the distribution system from the transmission grid line, right, out to the distribution systems, out to all our homes. So we passed some state legislation to try and do some things to make them more climate resilient, particularly to protect against windstorms and wildfire by undergrounding our utility lines. So instead of just replacing a pole with a pole, we should underground those lines. The other thing we did to try to reduce the cost, because as Richard pointed out when he was talking, they only get paid for the power they produce, so all of the hardware that they put up, they charge users for. So it raises our utility bill if they have to bring in a lot of equipment that doesn't already exist. So one of the things that we passed just this most recent session that ended in May was the right to run additional transmission lines on state highway rights of way, which should be obvious to all of us. We so commonly see telephone poles stood on the long highways, but there were actually regulatory barriers to allow these upgraded distribution systems. And if the San Luis Valley is going to have triple the capacity that it is shipping off to other people, not only in Colorado, but we're going to become part of a Western market where we can trade energy sources. So if we have lots of solar and someone doesn't want to use their gas-fired power plant, they can come over the grid and buy on what's known as the day-ahead market and buy our clean power, and we can ship it from grid to grid to grid to deliver them green electricity. So the San Luis Valley is designed to be the Rocky Mountain headquarters of solar energy, like the eastern plains of Colorado, plus Kansas, Nebraska, Wyoming, Minnesota, up into the Dakotas. is the wind capital, where all the giant wind farms are going. And even though the feds have, doubled the amount of tax credits they're giving to dirty energy, they have stripped away all the tax credits they're giving to clean energy. So they didn't put their thumb on the scale, they put their whole fist on the scale. And it's important that we do smart development, like undergrounding, like using our state highways, now there's a downside to that, and that's that as a competing source of power, one of the things that Colorado passed last year was nuclear power plants. So they classify nuclear power, regardless of the fact that it produces uranium spent fuel rods, which are radioactive for the rest of civilization. They now classify that as a clean energy resource, which means that a nuclear power plant qualifies for the same tax credits, the same favorable tax treatment as a wind plant and a solar plant. The other thing that affects the valley directly is, in addition to nuclear, they passed geothermal power. So we had a big fight with the hot springs developers all over the state because we don't want them tapping into those aquifers and taking from our hot springs resorts to create clean power. So we passed some laws to do setbacks and some things like that to try to protect those water sources. But that is something that you guys are going to absolutely want to keep an eye on, because you also have a lot of geothermal activity in the valley. So you're running out of water, but you got a lot of solar and a lot of geothermal.
I just wanted to add really quick though, geothermal is not that easy to develop in Colorado because it has to go through Colorado water law, and it has to go through Colorado Water Court. And that's different than other southwestern states like Nevada, where they don't have to go through that process. And going through water court is not an easy process. So there is a bit of a deterrent there. I just have to say that. But I'm actually wondering if I could kind of pull this cord, because I know it's behind the chair right now. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure, because I really want to hear about who's here. Okay, I think I know this guy, but go ahead.
I know this guy.
I'm Mark Jacoby. Chris and I have lived here for 37 years. I used to be the facilities manager at Valley View Hot Springs for about 14 years. So that's one of my claim to fame, I guess. But in the interest of brevity, I'm going to pass this along.
Maybe Bell Lakish. I'm retired now. I'm doing a social worker for a number of years, but I also worked with Chris for a while and San Luis Valley Ecosystem Council. And I'm a mother and a grandmother and a gardener.
My name is Killian Barrett. I'm in San Luis Valley. The company was hired to design model homes for the Selection County Housing Authority. And so I started being over here more often. We're a design build company, and we focus on ecological, social, and economically impactful construction and various different noise topics.
We should get you on the mic though. 'Cause you're
Yeah, we're on the microphone. Just do a visitor to our
just a brief one.
Okay. With a mouthful, yummy Jacoby. Hi everyone, my name is Belinda. So I'm a New Zealander, but right now I live in Santa Monica in California, and I'm friends with Anya, that's why I'm here. And I have a weekly podcast segment that's called It's the Planet Stupid. And I really try, as I was saying before, to emphasize the positive things that are going on. So I'm really, really keen to hear about all your alternative energy wins and the potential that you have. I know about the fights because it's really hard everywhere. And the crazy administration that we're up against right now that loves fossil fuels, which are finite as opposed to the infinite. Renewables. Anyway, thank you for having me here. It's beautiful in Crestone, and I love to move here, so my husband finds the altitude really challenging. So that's it for me.
Hi everyone, I'm Natalie Montesino. I'm the executive director of a nonprofit here in Colorado called the Climate Democracy Initiative. I'm also an instructor with Stanford University. I teach environmental policy and sustainable development in U.S.-Japan relations to students that are based in Japan. Kind of an awkward setup. But I was super invigorated by the conversation that you all just had on the main stage, and I got lots of questions and thoughts around civic participation models that can be used in energy transition scenarios and land and water use scenarios, and I would love to pick your brains, so thank you.
Happy to meet a CDI person here, a fellow CDI person.
Hi everyone, I'm Forrest Hoff. I'm the caretaker at the Medno Zapata Ranches here in the San Luis Valley for the Nature Conservancy. I was a teacher for 10 years, and for me it's really important that we include, invite, and involve the youth of America in solving these problems. And I think that if we asked, they would all be interested in participating. So I hope that we find ways to fold them into this work.
I'm Tim Allen, and I'm resident in Colorado. I live in the water department. I'm also a social and environmental activist. And I'm just here to listen to you all and be inspired. So,
My name is Dustin Freita, and I'm from the Taos Valley, and I'm previous board of directors for Guardians of Taos Water, and current board of directors for Sacred Water Mountain Society, and veterans of indigenous conflict on this continent, the U.S. military. I have a number of questions for you guys, especially you talked about Taos earlier being one of those valleys that achieved solar independence. And a lot of the years running up to that solar independence, we were being told all the benefits we were going to get from it, all the benefits we were going to gain from it, how our power bills were going to be cheaper. And now that we've been solar independent, our power bills have went up. And they're only focused at selling their excess energy and building new power lines, disrupting more of our land and communities with these power lines to sell that power away to someone else. So a lot of people feel pretty betrayed and lied to, which is pretty typical. I think we're all used to it. and after hearing you guys' conversation, I admire your efforts, I admire your work, but it seems pretty one-sided. Seems pretty apartheid, because our indigenous communities, which have a lot of efforts and a lot of work and success and struggle, were never talked about in these equations as having any impact or effect or consideration or opinions or ideas. And so, as part of why I came up here was just to help have a presence and spread a little seasoning throughout this place, because we talk about how we're going to move forward and deal with land and forest and waters. Whose land and forest and waters is it? And a lot of the policy, the political arguments that people want to act like we're all Republicans or Democrats. My people have no representation in this country. And there's a lot of other non-Native people who don't have representation in this country. And there's a lot of Anglo-Americans who are not represented by the Democrats and the Republican parties or the political system. And there's a lot of work and effort, struggle, and sacrifice being done by these people that is never a part of the equation. It's never a part of the topic of the conversation. Thank you.
I'm Joe. I don't have any adventures. I love the mountains. I've been raised here, but one of those people that doesn't have representation, and also feel lied to, and I'm curious to listen and trying to get my head around why almost all the speakers I've listened to point us back to policies that answer, and then equate that with people power, and for the Citizens United, they're like, our vote doesn't mean shit. So that's a question I have.
I'm a nobody.
We're all nobodies.
Emo.
Come on. Speak up. We all speak
Yeah,
up.
happy for points of view.
We all have a
It's talking
voice.
points.
Not sure how I'm going to follow that up. Hi, I'm Chris. I design and engineer solar electric systems.
I'm Debbie. I live in Crestone. I'm listening. I spend my life talking about these things and many others. I'm just here to listen tonight.
I am Gregory, and we live off-grid out that way. And I love Crestone. I love our off-grid living. I love what the Energy Fair is doing and presenting for everybody in our edification and learning, growing, and evolving as a community, individually, and as people in general to help our dear mother Gaia in all ways that we can. And this, my heart is so open for the Energy Fair.
Hey, I'm Stu. I've really enjoyed meeting everyone in this community. Everyone's really got a lot of drive, intelligence, really interesting folks here. Just moved to Colorado, be near family, and hopefully gonna help my folks get a homestead set up this upcoming year. I personally am an artist, craftsperson. I love making things with my hands, being self-reliant, and inspiring other people to feel the same.
While I have the microphone, I just want to expand on, I'm sorry I've forgotten your name already.
Dustin.
Dustin, what Dustin said. So I grew up in the state of Iowa, and Iowa has heavily invested in wind energy. And if you drive across the state, you see windmills from almost every point in the state. Over 80% of that energy is traded, leaves the state, and the state is powered by coal, and the power bills have gone up. So if you're familiar with this story, and the frustration of when a good idea becomes politicized and then benefits very few and leaves other people in its wake. So.
I just want to say that I can't speak for New Mexico, but in Colorado we recognize the Ute and the Southern Ute as the indigenous and equal members of the Colorado legislature. Every year their chiefs are invited to address the entire legislature. This lasts so they get to provide us with their priorities for speaking on behalf of their tribes so that the state can take them into account. We have worked closely with our indigenous relatives to try to do better at protecting their water. We are rapidly losing that fight, primarily to fracking, but also to nuclear power. Giant, enormous sucks of water that we cannot afford to lose. And then these enormous data centers that are coming in, when I hear that the valley is going to be producing 4 times as much electricity as it uses, I immediately say, who's coming for that electricity? It's artificial intelligence. It's Apple and Meta and Amazon. It's the rich men came and raped the land and nobody caught them. And it's happening all over again with a lot of assistance from the federal government. We can do small things at the state level. One thing that strikes me that is the minimum we owed our tribes is to say you have free access to all public lands in the state of Colorado. There are no state perk fees, there are no entrance fees. This is your land that we stole. We can at least let you walk on it again without paying the white man. That and land acknowledgements falls far short of what we owe the traditional caretakers and stewards of this land. And we have a really significant problem. It's the reason I get the disillusionment. We frequently suffer from disillusionment ourselves. Action makes us feel like we're doing the best we can. We're making a difference. Richard spends a lot of time on where is the right location, not just the easiest location, not just the most profitable location. Profit is driving so many of our decisions to the detriment of our land, air, and water. I am deeply concerned about the push for nuclear energy because they are talking about spinning up uranium mining at existing Superfund sites on both the Navajo Reservation and down in Canyon City around the prison metroplex. And I can't even imagine what's going to happen when there is a bunch of uranium dust in our captive population that cannot escape that mega prison complex out there in Canyon City. I worry about the fact that Rio Blanco County is running out of gas. And so they are proposing that they take over the Yucca Mountain failed storage project and that we now store the nation's nuclear waste in Rio Blanco County by the Dinosaur National Monument. So this does not strike me as something I'm willing to have happen so that rich utilities can get even richer and my electric bill goes up and up and up because there's always a richer company coming for my natural resources. That's what's handed back.
Yeah, I mean, with all due respect, since you brought up land acknowledgement, there was Kiowa, Comanche, Apache. There was many other tribes here besides the Utes and the Cheyenne.
Our land acknowledgement normally encompasses about 30 tribes.
And right now, your green energy that you profess yourself to be clean is going to come at the expense of Oak Flat, the last place the San Carlos Apache prisoners of war have. That's a good place. It's going to be mined for your clean green energy of your solar extraction. You know, so I don't know. I just had to point that out.
No, and Oak Flat is a huge fight. And, you know, activists have been fighting it for quite some time. I don't think we're going to win. I honestly don't.
No, because you're saying green, your energy's clean. You're saying this is the way out when it's obviously not. It's the same way. It's the same way.
Well, I mean, we do have to say that if it comes from the sky, it is infinite and it's free. No one can charge us for sunshine and no one can charge us for the wind blowing. Everything else is a natural, expendable resource.
Like the Apache.
Water, land, minerals, right? Uranium, lithium, right? For batteries, for all of our smartphones. All of those things are finite natural resources that I would argue we are not getting paid for. Those resources belong to the people of this country. We're not getting paid for them. Natasha's major battle is on federal leasing of oil and gas, where we actually rolled back increased royalty rates that they were supposed to pay us when they come and rape our land. Now they pay us far less.
You're getting paid?
Yeah, you're not.
Yeah, of course not.
No
you are, right?
Yes, you have no rights. Well, I don't know
Y'all heard that,
we
right?
are as individual people either.
All right, I'm
but
done.
some corporation
Thank you.
is. Some corporation is. That's part of the problem.
Well, I was going to answer the question on Citizens United, but the person who asked the question just walked away. But what I was going to say that's really important is that our system is imperfect and broken, and but it's really important that we don't take a defeatist attitude to things. And we've made a lot of progress over the years on environmental and social issues. They're not where we want them to be. But I think the other piece that we need to recognize as individuals, engaged citizens, as activists, as advocates, is that we need the time to be able to continue those battles and those movements. So oftentimes there's a win and then people go back to what they were doing. And that's not to say that the professional people don't go back to what they're doing, but everybody has a life to live. And we're living in a modern economy that is basically usurping our time more and more. I mean, just even when you just think about the level of information that we are assaulted with on a daily basis, that our brains don't really have the capacity to process, is that it's basically dulling our senses in terms of what we need to do in order to remain proactive. So I just want to encourage people to remember that we do have tools at our disposal and that we can't dismay in the fights. And the fights are there and we need to understand them, don't get me wrong, but we also need to be able to recognize that we can dig deeper into some other tools. So I'll just leave it at that, since the people that asked the questions seem to have disappeared. But I would love to talk to you more about some of the tools that you have and the work that you're doing on civic engagement.
May really quickly. What keeps him up at night? I can just speak loudly. One question, and maybe this is for Richard and you, Natasha. Oh, okay. I see.
I actually screwed up so that I could ask the question all day.
So I think my question gets to some of the earlier concerns that were being discussed by Dustin and Forrest about, what happens to a community when the resources that are created or extracted move away and the people don't continue to benefit. And I wonder if Alamosa or some other areas here in the valley have considered community benefit agreements, what your experience with been as legally binding agreements, and if that might be one method through which we can try to keep as much of the good things that emerge from the energy transition in the places where it's being created.
I'll start with that one because you brought up a term that was now just started making its way around. Jan has a much better statewide perspective on this than I do, but it's had a challenge with everything from sort of impact fees all the way through the community benefit agreements, because of some of the other structures we have about where funding can go and how. But yeah, so coming out of a bill 24, I think it was, 24, that they really tried to promote solar energy siting statewide. And initially it started as a much stronger bill than it ended up with. But what it did end up with was providing a lot of resources to local government. So that included better funding and engagement with CPW around wildlife and protected habitats, or kind of critical habitats that should be protected. One of the outcomes from that bill was that the state needed to put together a report on solar siting, so that one was just published. And that one actually, as it's sort of in the process of being published, as it's going around and as the stakeholders are engaging with that community benefit agreement is one of those conversations, because there has to be, especially on the utility scale, whether it's renewable or wind or gas, like that is the version that makes the corporations money, right? And they sell whatever they're producing to us. So that's the far end from autonomy and self-reliance. And so when we think about democratization of energy, the closer we can get to that autonomous, you still have a solar panel, but if you're living off grid, you're not paying anybody for the ability to use that solar panel, right? As you get integrated and as that scale goes up from the behind the meter to the community scale to the utility scale, it becomes much, much easier for those corporations. And that's why the industry is swapping out the coal plants with the natural gas and the natural gas with the wind and solar, but they're still doing it in a centralized fashion that allows them to aggregate the energy and sell it to you, because that's the only way that they exist. They have to make that money in order to do it. And along with that comes the profits, right? So the closer we can get that to the individuals, I'm guessing, so you said you designed solar systems, I'm thinking it's probably residential.
Mostly.
Yeah, and that's the absolute first place to start. So if the solar panel is going to be a bad thing, and there's no disagreement that you have to have a whole bunch of, hard to get minerals to make a solar panel work. There's arguments about, is that better than, the oil version? And even if you acknowledge that the solar panel is the best option, there's still a challenge. What's the best way to add a challenge to the solution that would benefit us as an individual versus benefiting a corporate owner? I think that's the scale.
Yeah, so on the main stage, I mentioned that we passed legislation to create virtual power plants so that you can create your own energy and sell it to the grid, and they're required to pay you the same price that they would pay a wholesaler, which means that they're not just asking you to do it out of the goodness of your heart to help your neighbor, which was the original solar push. You keep your lights on, and then your neighbor can come over and use your lamp. The community benefit agreement is brand new to Colorado, and we just implemented it in our first legislation this year in 2025. And it is for yet another opportunity to profit gouge and price gouge the Colorado populace by pretending that you can take carbon out of the sky and sequester it in the ground, and it will just stay there. It won't find its way back out. And the company will get tax credits for polluting when they capture it and bury it underground. So minerals in Colorado are often separate from the surface rights. So you may own your surface where your house is, but you don't own the minerals underneath them. In carbon storage, the little pockets of air that they want to shove this carbon in is owned by the surface estate. So that is why community benefit agreements came into effect, because they are asking you for the right to store this pollution on your property. It better benefit you. Don't do it out of the goodness of your heart. They're not sequestering carbon out of the goodness of theirs. They're sequestering carbon for profit. Take on that sequestration for profit. That is what this community gathering is about, is empowering all of us.
Yeah, I wanted to build on that a little bit because, we at CHC, we're in the business of trying to prevent the harm, so we're not in the business of mitigating it. I mean, unless there's a legal right there in an existing development project, we then would seek to secure the most protective regulations in place. But it's important to note that the narrative keeps trying to push people towards let's mitigate the harms and that will solve the problem. But the cumulative impacts that you have of these operations are the result of a mitigation-based strategy. So this is why it's so important to actually prevent the leasing from moving forward, prevent the development from going forward, because once that development is in, you are basically guaranteed harms, and that mitigation for who, at what point. So uncompensated, sure. But I mean, I think that needs to be in the lexicon here and we have a mitigation-based regulatory framework, and that is the problem. And then when you look at what's happening at the federal level, for example, with the rollbacks of NEPA, they don't want to look at cumulative impacts anymore. They just want to look at just a case-by-case piecemeal. Well, again, this is how we get the problems that we get. So happy to have more of that discussion, but I just wanted to put that out there, that we really need to be focused on preventing these harms from happening in the first place and not get distracted by mitigation.
Okay, just so you know, I am going to pass this around if people didn't have a chance to sign up, or they still want to, or you want to pick up some of the handouts that really clearly breaks down bills that you might find interesting. But I wanted to pivot the discussion because really we wanted to start talking about the idea of possible legislation based on alternative building materials that could be passed through the state legislature. And if you're interested in that, please just put, a working group next to your name, and please put an email as well. We can follow up on this and we can meet about this because there are people in the state now that are actually coming up with really clever ways to look at building material in a different way and incentivize people to start pursuing the idea of alternative building, which, as we know, something may start out alternative, but, if it makes sense and it's practical, it can become mainstream. And, there are a lot of great ideas in this valley, and in Crestone specifically, around people that have built straw bale homes, for example, and I'm looking at John here and Rita. Where is Rita? She left. Oh, she's over there. Okay.
In the shade.
In the shade. Yeah, and they're building a straw bale house, and John has thought about, incorporating all these pieces to it. And what I have learned about being in a straw bale is that it's comfortable all year long, and it's cool in the when it's hot out, and it's warm when it's cool out. And most people I know that have straw bale don't really burn a lot of wood in the winter, and it's some of the more comfortable homes that I've been in. And I'm just wondering, I don't know how you want to take this in what direction, but if you could kind of lay the groundwork for how we might be able to structure a piece of legislation that could incorporate some of these other materials, that would be great. And if anybody else has any ideas too, please feel free to jump in and contribute.
Yeah, I'd certainly like to hear from the builders, but as I said, what the Energy Office has indicated a priority for, and what the governor has indicated a priority for in his last year in office, is two things. Designating more state parks and state land that can be protected, that falls under the general classification of 30 by 30, meaning let's protect 30% of our land and 30% of our water by the year 2030. And so we're still trying to grow that footprint of untouchable lands, and we need public input on new areas that deserve protection. I just found out about the back way into the valley that apparently goes through some incredibly scenic volcanic area that maybe ought to be considered for protections against development and growth. But on the building materials, like I said, we passed the initial attempt, but only for commercial buildings. And a lot of the truly revolutionary thinking in design is happening at the residential level. So we really need more input because, flavor of the month here with this discussion, when it's all about profits, it's all about maximizing the return on investment and minimizing what the consumer gets for their dollars. We need to flip that by saying we're going to fund projects that maximize what the consumer gets for their dollar. And I can't think of a better community to share knowledge with than this community, rather than making Larimer County, where Fort Collins is, reinvent the wheel. And then Weld County, reinvent the wheel. And every county with 1041 powers reinvents the wheel, right? That's what's happening here with the solar regulations. So we need to sort of work together and recognize that good ideas should be shared, and that the state should create an environment that encourages the growth of good ideas and discourages helter-skelter, cheap and dirty development for the sake of,
Could you just kind of take us through a process of, say this working group started coming up with some really good ideas about how to structure, incorporate certain content within the legislation that could provide tax incentives for people, that could provide loans for people, because I know that's a big issue right now. If you want to build, and with alternative materials, you can't get a loan. Or insurance. And so, what are ways that we can help, encourage the discussion so that people can benefit from, obviously, being able to build with this material with zero carbon footprint, but also financial benefit from using this material?
Well, I mean, one of the things you want to do is look for uniformity and conformity when you find it, and then require that the state adopt it for every county in the state. So you want to define alternative building materials that you know are low carbon: straw bale, hempcrete, aircrete. I'm sure I'm leaving out a whole bunch of things that are lower carbon building materials. There's also, I think, an opportunity for deconstruction code. Because these natural weather events are causing more destruction of personal property, there needs to be a more intelligent way to deconstruct a damaged building and reuse those materials, make them available for reuse elsewhere. And we've got to have the building codes and the land use permitting and all of those things that are traditionally barriers to early adopters. We've got to make them smooth pathways for these adopters. So the first thing that I would do if I was going to approach your state representative, Matthew Martinez, about a bill to employ embodied carbon at the residential level is make a list of all the low carbon building materials that ought to qualify for state subsidies, for state tax credits, for state support at the building code level. We passed the low energy carbon code. Now all we have to do is add to it. These building materials now qualify for the low energy carbon code. And that makes you eligible for tax incentives that the state can provide on the federal level. So that's how I would start.
Does anyone want to add to or have questions for Jan about how we would go about doing that?
Yeah.
Well, I think one of the things that will probably have to be addressed, and pain as it is that you have to prove that the material that you're advocating for is solid. Insurance companies don't care. They need to be proven that it's fireproof. All of the hoops that you got to run through. So I think you have to be prepared to deal with that aspect of it before you get too far down the pipe. So you're going to have a, what is it, USB or no, not this thing. Consumer product safety sort of thing. So that insurance companies and the state can be assured that they're not just being lobbied for something that they can't find reliable.
Yeah, I just want to say one more thing about the issue with insurance companies. Colorado spun up its own insurance company of last resort because more and more wildfire-adjacent communities are having their homeowners insurance canceled, and they can't get replacement homeowners insurance. This happened in California, it's now happening in Colorado, largely due to the Marshall Fire, which was our first urban firescape that wiped out 1,000 homes and shocked us all on New Year's Eve when we thought we were safe because we were in winter season. And we lost 1,000 homes. We not only lost 1,000 homes, we lost 1,000 Boulder County homes, which means expensive homes, right? So that galvanized the state to go into action and say, we can't be Florida or Louisiana or California where you have uninsurable properties. I don't know that this will fly, but I would certainly run it up the flagpole. Why can't we insure alternative building materials through the Colorado property insurance program? If national insurance companies won't cover it, why can't the state? Off to the other question.
More or less. Hey, more or less just an idea point here, but can we work with some of our local universities and professors and scientists there to test these alternative building materials to help us gain certification? I know a lot of electric systems that don't have UL listing, they can't be integrated into the grid. So we're having a barrier there with these that could be a lot less expensive, but if we're able to maybe work across the field, I wonder if there's a way we can help to try to get the state to allow some certification through where if it's been tested and we have record of it, we can work from there.
I just want to, while I have the microphone again, I grew up in a passive solar, earth burn, timber framed home made of reclaimed materials. And I think one of the challenges around this is that these projects are extremely nuanced, and to kind of define some of these parameters can be really difficult. And for my father, who built this house, that was just not worth the time going through any of the resources that might have been available to him in the 80s when he was doing that. More recently, I was working for the National Center for Craftsmanship out of the city of Fort Collins, and Fort Collins does have some legislature around raising structures, including the requirement that the materials are sorted. The National Center for Craftsmanship, where I worked, went the additional step of finding sources other than the landfill for these materials, whether it is to be recycled into a new alternative material or just put into home projects. I mean, everything from using just Facebook Marketplace to say, hey, we have this pile of 2x4s that just have nails and come get them. And then I think like something that can really help with the legislation is having data, and that's one of the things we did is we weighed and measured everything we took out of the buildings we deconstructed. And then we were also partnered with Colorado State University with various professors that were using that for research and for education. So there are people out there doing these things. But again, I just want to reiterate, like, these projects are really nuanced, these alternative projects, and sometimes maybe less legislation is more for those. Or as is the case with Humboldt County in California, they have a permitting process. If you want to build an alternative structure, it's a $20 permit, and they just want a rough idea of the materials going in and the plan of the structure. So I think that there are some ways to support people doing those projects that are have a low entry price and can help people that are doing that be in the clear and not be afraid of some kind of retribution for doing an alternative building project.
Outside the microphone. A lot of things I want to talk about, but I'll just say important points to note. Construction industry, someone said to me one time, a mentor said, it's risk management. And we gotta always remember like that's what it comes back to when folks have their own land and say like, oh, the government's not letting me do this. It's kind of like, okay, what are the actual risks here? So like part of why an insurance company doesn't want to insure you is because they think they're going to lose money or they think they're exposed, whether it's correct or not. When you're allowing someone to build something like it's, I can build what I want on my land. Well, if your house catches fire and causes the problem for the property next door, that's no longer the boundary. Nature's boundaries don't exist at your property boundary. And so this is a very complex subject, and the gentleman who was here earlier on too, like bringing in those aspects to that just adds 10 times more layers. All the things you're talking about are extremely complicated. It's all about conversation. There's no easy answers. It's emotional, it's technical, and there's a lot of disagreement and a lot of information that very few people are able to process in one person or in one organization or one entity. And so I just want to throw that to everyone about this conversation, because like I would say I'm driven by passion, but I'm a technician. Like we're design and build, we try to address all these issues as much as possible in a large variety of ways as we can, like social, environmental, and economical impact. And it's difficult. And when we make the best decisions that we can, we are still doing it in the dark. And so we're just feeling our way through. Now this is something I just kind of want to say to Dustin, like I understand where he's coming from. That's an intense feeling coming from a country that suffered occupation not that long ago, and that's in my blood. I just understand what that feels like. But that doesn't, that feeling doesn't necessarily make us come up with the best solutions or help us figure out. Just to be blunt right now, we're in a very weird, strange time where some of the most horrific things we could imagine humanity can do has a chance of being legislated, or not being legislated and having legislation on the board, and that's like a really intense time. I feel like I go full spectrum, but just to give all you guys credit for the work that you are doing as public servants in whatever degree or you are. I just want to thank you guys for that. It's crazy what you guys are involved in right now. The attention and commitment you have to it.
Yeah, so I was just going to throw in there, it may not be as bad on the alternative materials as you think. So I had this conversation a couple of years back. The state, one of the rules that was passed was the more recent, not the low energy carbon code, but its predecessor, more recent to get energy, better energy in buildings, type of buildings that perform better. And so as part of that process, the Valley kind of came together, figured out what was the locally appropriate best solution for us, and chose to adopt a building code that was more modern than some of us. In Alameda County, for instance, we went from a 2012 International Building Code to the 2018 version. Rio Grande County went from a 2006 to the 2018 version. Canales and Castilla County had no building codes and went to the 2018 version. I was up in Saguache at a public meeting, kind of answering questions and talking about it. Saguache chose not to adopt the building code, which, again, whatever's most appropriate for the local community is the right path that every community should take. Within the building code that we adopted, though, there is a section on straw bale. So straw bale is an acceptable building code. It can get a building permit, it can get a certificate of occupancy, and that's what you're thinking about the risk perspective. That's what the insurance companies are looking for. That's what everybody's looking for, is that piece of paper. That's the reason it's easier to get stuff done on the commercial side than the residential side, because the residential side has to kind of imagine every possibility. The commercial side says, where's the design professional's opinion on this? You get an architect and engineer's stamp on it, it's pretty much good, right? Now, they're not going to stamp on things that they can't guarantee are going to work and meet the intention of the thing, but we have a lot in Alameda County. We, in our land use code in 2018, explicitly called out that we were going to allow alternative buildings. And since that point, we've actually permitted. We've got an airship under construction right now. We've got a couple container homes that are under construction right now. Nobody's proposed a straw bale, but we would certainly permit that. Adobe is now the building codes that would be permitted. These are falling within the rules that already exist to allow the insurance companies to go, oh, that got the stamp, that got the piece of paper, the local jurisdiction said yes, it must be good, and we're good to go. So that's something to keep in mind. As great as it is to not have somebody telling you what you can and can't do, that also means that everybody else that's looking at you from the outside says, I have no idea what that person is doing. It's super risky for me as an insurer. So, but thinking about the building codes, I think the suggestion that was made earlier about identifying the materials that aren't included yet. Hempcrete isn't specifically called out, it's headed there. We've actually got Naturality, they've got a booth here. They're doing they're doing a commercial project for a resort right now, but their intention is to continue to build homes under that. We're going to permit those. These things are achievable if you work with your local permitting agencies, and if they're open to the idea, and if they've got the cover as well. If they can say, yeah, look, it's in the building code that we adopted, of course we're going to permit this, right? The same thing for your insurers. So think about the materials that you want to have in there, and then figure out how do we get that into the process.
I'll just say that utilizing our Institutes of Higher Learning is also a great idea, because the state funds our state universities and state colleges, so we can direct funding for studies and working groups and reports through those very same, through Adams State, through Western State, through Colorado College. We have lots of tools available that help bring our youth into the process and tap their fresh learning and combine it with our more wise experience and hopefully come up with a baseline that the state can move forward with that encourages more ways to provide energy efficient buildings.
We've just gotten the word that we have to wrap it up. But I just want to thank everybody for their input. I really do feel like, I wouldn't say that something like just gelled in the last hour, but I think there are tendrils heading in that direction. And I feel really good about it. And again, if people are really interested in kind of keeping discussions going, we can really, and I'm thinking quarterly, we could meet on Zoom, which I would be glad to organize. And Richard, I do not want to put you on the spot, or Jan, I do not want to put you on the spot. And Natasha, you're more than welcome to jump in, but maybe we could just have a discussion group for we probably have to start out at about 90 minutes. But we could just start structuring ideas around things that we could, get the legislature to take seriously in terms of funding and getting us moving in a good direction in terms of what building needs are right now here in our own communities. And I think that's very possible. And I just want to say, because I know that it's legislation, it's affected me negatively, and honestly, with the legislation that I've worked on, which has been land protection, I don't really see a negative side to it. I mean, there might be somewhere along the way, but honestly, anything we can do right now to protect large landscapes and reduce fragmentation is a good thing. And it's also true in the building realm. We just have to really be clever about the continuity that we want to keep, right? That's what we really want to focus on, is elevating that continuity that brings quality of life, which will happen through being able to build with material that we're all really comfortable living in. So with that, does anybody want to say anything?
I just want to say thank you all.
Thank you very, very much. Really,
Thank you.
really, thank you so much for continuing the conversation.
All right.